Origin Chess Homestead reaction. This is the real tank genius of World War II, Percy Hobo Hobart. Hobo Hobart. Okay. Why is his nickname Hobo? Yeah, this is the tank genius from World War II. Was a tank mechanic. Yeah, so this is the newest fat electrician video. This is about a tank genius of World War II. So I don't know how he's a tank genius. Does he repair tank, or is he like some badass guy with a tank who just like know how to use tank the best way? I don't know. I'm guessing another badass people series. Yeah, it would be interesting if that's the case, especially of the World War II. World War II is like the peak of insane warfare. And obviously in that there are some people who like insanely OP and crazy OP. And Fire Tuition is a channel which basically covers it. I'm surprised that I don't think I've come across any other channel who specifically talk about the people involved in events like this who's like really OP. I guess you have to like cut through all the paper to find and track them, because usually this kind of wars doesn't track singular person that much. It's like events happen, and I guess you really need to see through all that. I don't know, but yeah, Fire Tuition does that. It's always awesome, so let's watch it. Remember, if you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe so I know which type of videos to react to more. If you haven't seen my other reactions to things like Fire Tuition reactions, things like that, check out the link in the description or in the end of the video and the card. I'll create a playlist for it and things. And yeah, let's do it.
For this video, I just wanted to know how the tanks made it onto the beaches at D-Day, and what I found instead is one of the greatest anti-hero stories of all time, and it rewrote my understanding of history. Today we're talking about the man that quite literally wrote the book on armored warfare, a World War I veteran that was forced into early retirement because his fellow officers didn't like him very much. But after German tanks rampaged through France and North Africa utilizing their new blitzkrieg tactic, Winston Churchill himself would call upon this man to leave retirement and go toe-to-toe with the infamous German tank commanders Erwin Rommel and Heinz Guderian. Ladies and gentlemen, the hero of D-Day that you've probably never heard of, Major General Sir Percy Cleghorn Stanley Hobart, aka Hobo. But first, a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Delete Me. Delete Me is an online subscription service. It's a very straightforward, simple business. You give them money, they get rid of your personal information off the internet. Okay, look, here's the deal. Somehow, some way, your personal information is on the internet. Your name, your spouse's name, your parents' name, your address, your last 5 addresses, your phone numbers, and all of your emails are all sitting in some data broker's bank, and they're selling that information for money. But the good news is that these data brokers are legally required to delete your information if you submit an opt-out request. And that's where Delete Me comes in. They will go to all the big data brokers and automatically submit opt-out requests on your behalf, and you don't have to do anything. And I know what you're thinking, because I thought the same thing. I don't want to give all my personal information to Delete Me either, because that just seems counterproductive. Okay, here's the thing with that. You don't have to give them all your private information. You can literally give them your name and your email address. You can give them more information if you want, but really all they need is your name and email, and then you come back a few days later and they just start asking you a bunch of yes or no questions. By using just your name and email, they'll search through all the data banks and figure out who you are, and they'll ask you a bunch of weird questions like, is this your dad? Is this your mom? Is that a relative? Is this your address? Did you used to live here? Did you grow up at this address? Is this your phone number? Is this your email? They know all of this information just by you giving them your name and email, using all the information that these data brokers have. And then you just let them know, yes, that's me, and then they will delete all that information for you. A couple days after that, they're going to send you a report. Here was mine. Over 70 data brokers had my information, and there were 489 listings where that information was for sale, and Delete Me submitted opt-out requests for all of them. Now, those data brokers are probably going to be able to get my information again, but Delete Me is constantly going to be searching for my info and automatically submitting the requests as soon as those listings pop up. Go check out Delete Me. I'll have a link and a discount code down below. Let's get back to the video. Percy Hobart was born in India in 1885 and joined the British military in 1902. He would then go on to fight in World War I. While there, in typical anti-hero fashion, he made a name for himself as being extremely effective, but unorthodox and disobedient at the same time. Because of this, many of the other British officers don't really care for him. Despite that, he makes it through World War I, ends up earning himself a military cross, and then in 1919 he goes off to college. Graduates from college 4 years later in 1923, he then volunteers to be an officer in the Royal Tank Corps. Now, he volunteered because most people did not want this position. And that's because at this point in time, a lot of the high-ranking British officers didn't see the true potential that tanks and armored vehicles have.
Well, there you go. Yeah. So he was born in India, obviously British India at the time. So this is like post World War I. I remember like thinking about World War One in tank and things like that, right? World War One was always like the first of things, which made it dangerous in its own way, right? Always people see World War Two versus World War One. They're like World War Two was so insanely fucked up that World War One is kind of is like really small compared to 100 million dead and all that. Yeah, that is true. I mean, obviously, if you say it like that, that is kind of true. But World War One was like a lot of firsts, right? In World War One, like grenades were the first things. Like you're not thinking grenade in at least in that way, right? World War One was the first one where the tanks were introduced. Like OP, like out of the comic book type of things. Because before that, you're not thinking of like a metal armor shit coming towards you, trying to kill you, right? You're not worried about all that shit. Now, like a tank is a real thing, right? So in that time, obviously tanks were not that great. It's like the first thing ever British started it, right? So obviously people are like, oh, this is just a simple tool. And imagine warfare until then. You're not thinking of a vehicular style land-based attack thing, right? You're not using some vehicle thing to attack people. So when the first time you use something like that tank, people are going to think, oh, this is like a very specific time for very specific scenario. It's not much more than just some simple tool. Like very specific points you can only use. People are probably thinking that. So I can see where they're coming from, people thinking like that. But over time, tanks are going to get more refined, and obviously tanks will be one of the biggest thing.
Vehicles had, they simply viewed them as a single tool for trench warfare to get from one trench to the other. They didn't realize that one day it was going to replace cavalry. Percy Hobart, on the other hand, was a visionary and saw its true potential, and that's why he volunteered. Not only that, he was also very vocal about this opinion, and he would actually persuade a lot of the younger soldiers to believe the same thing, which honestly isn't a very hard sell. The new guy joins the army, and you're like, hey, quick question, did you want to ride a horse into battle, or did you want to drive a fucking tank? Okay, everybody's picking a tank. And over time, his advocacy for change ends up making a lot of the old cavalry officers end up hating him because he's kind of trying to make them obsolete. And you have to remember, at this point in time, the British officer corps is very, very cliquey, like they're socialites and gentlemen, and they have to, conduct themselves in a certain manner and all that BS.
Yeah,
so when Hobart comes in and starts ruffling feathers, it upsets the entire officer corps, and they all pretty much hate him at this point. Despite that, he knows he's right, and he just keeps working on pioneering new
people know their place, apparently. Obviously around this time that would be the big thing.
Tactics and new applications for tanks. Now, one of the few legitimate concerns about having tanks on the battlefield at this point in time was that they were basically autonomous. And what I mean by that is once the tank crew got their orders, hopped in the tank and took off, that was
What is this from?
Because tanks didn't have radios and stuff yet at this point in time. So once they left, you couldn't call them back, you couldn't change up the mission, they couldn't communicate with anybody outside of that tank. So Hobart comes out and he's like, well, hey, rather than not using tanks because they can't communicate, how about we just, I don't know, put some radios inside of them. So he fights tooth and nail for like a year to make that happen, gets radios put in all of his tanks, and then trains his guys how to run battle drills, being able to actually communicate with each other and the chain of command. And guess what? It works exactly how you would expect it to. I mean, this is the upside down ketchup bottle of the tank world. Like somebody finally came out with this idea and everybody's like, how did I not come up with that $1 billion idea? At this point, all the junior officers and lower enlisted are like, holy shit, this is awesome. And all the older...
You see that, how did I not think of element, right? That happens a lot in life. Not that there's a difference between like learning about something and learning about it as a whole and then thinking, oh, this is simple. Why didn't I thought of that? That's different. It's like you didn't thought of that because you couldn't. Something that is like, it is very easy, but you couldn't put it in place. When you realize somebody else did, you just feel like, oh, wait a minute, I could have done it. What the fuck, why didn't I thought of that? That's the thing. Idea is really important. Right? Something could be simplistic as fuck, but you'll never think of, because to think of anything as innovatively, like first way, right? It's not as easy as it looks. But in this case, it feels weird because the issue, like you're doing certain thing, right? And while doing that thing, you come across a hurdle. Now you come across a hurdle like communication is the error. Great. Why their first thought wasn't like nobody's going to scream through their tanks, so why not put radios, because we have radios there. This is not something like a, I don't know where to put pieces type of way, like some light bulb way. It's literally like a hurdle. Now where to go from this? Like communication, you can either scream or use radio. Why didn't they thought of radio? That's just, I don't know, it feels weird to me. There's not one of those things like 100 possibilities you have to choose one. It's like one or two. Communication as there are, okay, what do we now? No one said like, what about radio?
experienced officers that already hated Hobart lose their shit because he's now actively making them look stupid.
What are those? You are wearing his merchandise!
So once that gets worked out, he starts developing legitimate battle strategies and drills and training his men on how to conduct tank warfare, how to integrate tanks with infantry, really laying the groundwork for what would become modern tank warfare. This goes on for a couple of years, and then in 1927, he ends up being a co-respondent in a divorce case. Now, I'll be honest, I had to Google what that meant, but apparently co-respondent is the fancy British officer polite way of saying Percy Hobart was banging somebody else's wife. Her name was Dorothea Field, and of course, she was another British officer's wife.
Naughty.
Fancy British officer polite way of Google what that meant, but being a co-respondent in a divorce case. Now, I'll be honest, I had to Google saying Percy officer's wife.
Of course, now I hate it, I see it. What the fuck?
Naughty.
After that divorce is finalized, Dorothea and Percy get married pretty much immediately, and the rest of the officer corps now absolutely hates him, and they actively try to get him kicked out of the military because this is not gentlemanly behavior. They're not able to get it done. Hobart stays in the military and continues to develop and refine armored warfare, and one of the things he starts to do is look back into history and see if there's any lessons that he can apply to tank.
In British history, I can see that a lot. Efficiency of what you're doing is not that important, but how you do it. You need to be a gentleman. That's more important. Not like you're really effective. We could use you like military will use you, right? It's not even like a spite. I mean, obviously it's spite, but the use of spite is different. I mean, they could be using not being gentlemen as a tool just to kick him out because they hate him. But they hate him because certain element is also like he's not gentleman-like type of way. So I kind of see that when I see the every culture comes through certain like societal trait. British trait is like being proper gentleman. So I can kind of see that, but still. And after going through World War I, which is like, apart from World War II, was the most insane shit ever. They went through all that, right? And yeah.
Tank warfare, and one of the things that he hones in on is the Mongols. The Mongols were so successful because they utilized cavalry to strike deep into enemy territory at strategic points, weakening their entire empire. And Hobart says, what if I could do the same thing, but with tanks? And to anybody that knows a lot about history, that sounds an awful lot like the German Blitzkrieg tactic, and that's because it is. Yeah, the Germans didn't come up with the Blitzkrieg. Percy Hobart did.
I was about to say that.
Heinz-Gedermann, the German tank commander that is the architect of the Blitzkrieg, is well known to have had every single paper that Percy Hobart published translated into German, and he kept that with him everywhere he went. Yeah, the infamous German tank commanders Rommel and Gedermann didn't revolutionize armored warfare. They just copied Hobart's homework. So if Percy Hobart...
I was about to say that before, not the Blitzkrieg thing, but the tank thing. Because when the video started, like Frederick said, like tank wasn't seen as much of anything. Before Hobart is literally revolutionizing tank with the radio and everything, tactics and everything. Now, imagine not Blitzkrieg, everything after this. There is not a single war or warfare which doesn't have tank as their main thing. They're going to invade, they're going to march through tanks, right? Cross through the line, there's going to be later with tank, because why do like their old style just infantry just go in front of a machine gun and die? If you don't have to, if you can use tank, you're going to use tank. It's just common sense. Blitzkrieg used a lot of tanks. That's the whole thing. Nazis in general used tanks as a major thing, with just like a horde of tanks in one line just to show off force, right? All this basically comes from this guy, right? This singular person is so influential. It can trace to all the way to like Hitler, World War II, Nazis, and their main strategy of like Blitzkrieg and everything, which is insanity when you think of it. Just one person
is the actual genius behind the Blitzkrieg. Why don't most people know that? Why does everybody give Germany credit? And why didn't the British use it first? Or at the very least, know that it was a possibility when it was used against them in France when they got their asses beat in 6 weeks. That is because the British chain of command hated the man that came up with the Blitzkrieg, and for that reason made the entire strategy a failure. In 1934, Britain conducted a large training exercise where Percy Hobart was going to be allowed to try out his new methods. If you don't know, when you're conducting a large military training exercise, you have like Team A, Team B, and then you have the umpires, so to speak. You have the people making sure that both teams are doing the right things, saying, yeah, that works, no, that doesn't work, declaring who wins and who loses. The umpires conspired against Hobart because they were military officers and they didn't like him, and basically made his entire strategy fail. Fast forward 1937, Hobart is given command of the 1st Armored Division, Great Britain's first modern tank division. Because of this, a bunch of British officers promptly throw a bitch fit and try to get Hobart kicked out of the military again. It fails again, but the chain of command has to come up with a compromise, and that...
What if Hobart was born in USA, right? I mean, obviously, like, tank thing was a British thing. How would have done tank thing? Well, let's just see. He was like a American guy, basically saw tanks in Britain, convinced everybody in America to adopt tanks and everything. He would have been successful in America because this kind of shit doesn't happen there, right? Obviously, like, chain of command suppressing guy does happen. We've seen video from Federation, but not in this way, right? I mean, they would have seen the at least like a attractiveness of this strategy and thing. And any other way, like, British was mostly in defense in World War II, at least at the start of it, right? So France and everything trying to defense against Hitler's whole thing worked because he was the aggressor and he was being aggressive while invading. So that blitzkrieg thing worked. Only way British could use that is just like they do it first as well. So how that would work with them, I don't know. But yeah.
That compromised is to take Hobart and send him down to Egypt, where he can take command of the 2nd Armored Division, which was basically, we're going to ship him halfway across the world and then pretend he doesn't exist.
Yeah, look
out of
at the
sight,
sand.
out of mind, right? So Hobart gets down to Egypt, and it is a complete shit show because tanks are effectively replacing cavalry at this point, so it's cavalry officers that are running tank divisions, and they have chosen to not read any of the literature or training material that he has spent the last decade developing, and they are operating tanks like they are dragoons. If you don't know, a dragoon is kind of like cavalry, except it's not. They ride in on horses and then they dismount and go into battle on foot. And that's what the 2nd Armored Division is being trained to do. They roll up in the tank, and then the gunner and the loader stay in the tank while the rest of the crew gets out and fights like infantry while being a static target instead of a moving target, which is the entire point of being a fucking tank. The chain of command is effectively trying to do everything they can to make tanks look bad.
We have armor shit. We can get shot. We can get hurt. We are in an armor vehicle. How to make it useful? There's a guy who wrote it. Fuck everything. Let's read it. It's about life and death. It's not about my ego or anything. Like, I don't get this, right? I don't get, like, in life and death, I don't get this. You can have all your societal issues and all that, like, hating somebody because he's not a gentleman, hating somebody for whatever reason. But when it's life and death, at least check it out. Maybe you'll be alive if you're in a fucking armored tank. It's an armored tank. It's in the name, it's armored.
And ineffective because by extension it makes Hobart look bad and ineffective. The running joke when Hobart gets there is that the Egyptian force is the Egyptian farce and the mobile division is the immobile division. But when Hobart shows up, he turns the entire thing around. Between 1930 and 1940, he trains this entire division how to actually conduct tank warfare, and they get super effective at it. And the men absolutely love him. Because Percy Hobart is not only a great teacher, but he actually wants every man under his command to understand what they are doing and why they are doing it. When at this point in time, many other officers don't care about that. They just want you to shut up and follow orders. But Percy Hobart wants you to know what you should be doing and why you should be doing it. That way, if the chain of command ever fails, you can make intelligent decisions regarding what needs to be done.
That's
in
how
short,
it should be.
Percy Hobart treats his men like they're grown-ass men, and they...
That's the reason why in any, like, let's say engineering, there's a reason why you go through all the, like, things you learn, all the degrees and shit, right? And then you become a cog in a machine at the start, obviously. But even then, you know all the shit, right? There's a reason behind it. It's not like, oh, wait a minute, you want to be like some low-level guy, you don't need to learn all this shit, just learn follow the command. You don't learn that, you learn the whole thing. It should be the case in the military as well. You're not supposed to know everything other than just like blindly. You're just creating this weird element where like things can fail a lot. These are humans. That's the whole thing. That's the thing about humans. If you employ a human to do something, human can use his own brain. That's the advantage of human. So if you remove that element, that's just like fucked up. It's like giving some animal to do a job and just teaching them one thing. If they don't do one thing, everything else will fail. Right? If they forget no, you need to teach a human basically why you're doing it so it can make its own decision in a way.
Absolutely love him for it. And because of that, he gains overwhelming support from the junior officers and enlisted men, and he becomes immensely popular.
No. Don't like that.
And because of this, they finally force him out of the military because they sent him down to Africa, intentionally sabotaged him, and yet again, he's managed to turn the entire situation around and turns it into a positive thing. So they just end up getting him fired. In 1940,
How?
he is forced into early retirement. On his final departure from Egypt, the men of the 2nd Armored Division lined the entire road to wish him farewell as their sign of how much they actually respected this man. So Percy goes back home, but still wanting to be involved in the military, he joins the Home Guard, which is like the British equivalent of the National Guard. And he gets busted down from Lieutenant General to Corporal, which if you don't know military ranks is like going from CEO to front desk receptionist. Not that I'm trying to talk bad about receptionists, but I'm trying to give you an accurate depiction of what a drastic change in authority this is. 5 months after Hobart's forced into retirement, the German military rolls into France with tanks, utilizing the Blitzkrieg tactic that Percy Hobart designed, and completely stomps the British and the French army in a matter of 6 weeks. Erwin Rommel
Wait a minute, how did they got hold of his things? Isn't that a British thing? Isn't that should be in the British military secure those documents?
then goes and proceeds to rampage through North Africa, and the only people that even kind of slow him down are Hobart's men of the 2nd Armored Division that is now known as the 7th Armored Division, aka the Desert Rats. At this point, Winston Churchill starts asking questions and realizes what his officer corps has done, and he personally calls Percy Hobart back into service and awards him the rank of Major General, at which point all of the officers throw a fit yet again, saying that he's 57 years old, he's too old to serve in the military, and they try to get him med boarded out. Winston Churchill yet again intervenes and stops the med board and issues this statement, quote, "The high commands of the army are not a club. It is my duty to make sure exceptionally able men, even though not popular with their military contemporaries, are not prevented from giving their services to the crown." Translation, quit being a bunch of catty bitches, we need this guy. By the time all that
Shut
political
the
BS
fuck
gets
up, that's what
done,
it is.
Rommel is back in Europe and he has been tasked with fortifying the Atlantic Wall, the German defense from Norway to Spain in case the Allies should invade. Rommel reinforces it with 260,000 men manning over 15,000 concrete bunkers and artillery positions. The entire thing is coated with barbed wire. It has anti-vehicle emplacements to prevent tanks and other vehicles from getting up the beach. And they lay over 200 million mines. And the man put in charge of figuring out how to penetrate those defenses is none other than Percy Hobart. He has re-entered the picture and he knows that these kids have been stealing his homework. He comes in with the complete dad energy of, I taught you everything you know, but I didn't teach you everything I know. He takes command of the 79th Tank Regiment and gets to work immediately. It is now Major General Hobart and Erwin Rommel going toe-to-toe in a battle of wits that will determine the fate of the world. And obviously we're going to handle this issue with tanks, which brings us to problem number 1. How are we going to get tanks on the beach? How are we going to get a 70,000 pound hunk of metal with a gun from the boat through the water onto the beach? Obviously, we just got to make a tank float, and it can't be that hard because battleships float, right? I mean, those are big and heavy and made out of metal, so why can't we do the same thing with a tank? All you have to do is displace enough water, and bada bing, bada boom, you're floating. So all we got to do is increase the surface area of a tank. So they take a gigantic tube of wax canvas, wrap it around the tank, and then have inflatable tubes that when they inflate it, the canvas stands straight up, and basically it is a tank inside of a giant canvas tube. And then we'll just add a couple of little boat propellers on the back of the tank so it'll push itself through the water. Problem solved. Sounds stupid, works terrific. So now that we've got the Sherman duplex drive amphibious tank figured out, the next problem, what is the beach made out of? Are the tanks going to get hung up and stuck? Because we can't have that happening either. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a submarine. We're going to send them out. They're going to wait till night. Once night falls, the sailors are going to go ashore, gather up a bunch of the dirt from the beach, and figure out what it's made out of. It's made out of blue clay. Probably the worst possible thing because those tanks will for sure get stuck in clay. So obviously problem number 2, how on earth are we going to get the tanks through all this blue clay? It would be really nice if we had a road. You know what? Fuck it. We're just going to bring our own road. Ladies and gentlemen, the bobbin. That is a Churchill tank with a gigantic spool of canvas that has metal rods inside of it that literally goes ahead first and lays down a road for all the other tanks to drive on right up the beach. Again, it looks really silly, but it works super well. At this point,
Wait a minute, how does it work when the tank goes over it? Wouldn't that just like riding a car over something like a, I don't know, a bad shit or something? Wouldn't that just get tangled up or something? Because it's not going to be sturdy. It's not going to stick to the ground that way, right? Do they put something in there like a spike type of way so it sticks to the ground or something?
all the other people that hate Hobart are starting to make fun of him. They're starting to refer to these tanks as Hobart's funnies, but they have no idea how important these tanks are going to end up being. Hobart is over here actually trying to save the world by any means necessary. He realizes it doesn't matter how cool it looks, he just needs it to work, and he only needs it to work once. Meanwhile, all of his other contemporaries are worried about looking good while they do it. Okay, problem number 3, marching right up the beach. Now we have to worry about the mines and the barbed wire. We can't be blowing the tracks off our tanks with mines. We need to clear the barbed wire for the men, and we don't want the barbed wire getting hung up in the tracks of the tank. What are we gonna do? Things are about to go from looking weird and silly to looking terrifying and awesome, because the plan for this is to eat the barbed wire and blow up the mines in front of us using the Sherman Crab, aka the flail tank. Okay, so just so we're all on the same page, in theory, we have now figured out how to say—
Oh, that's the thing that people use even today, right? I saw that in Top Gear, that clearest mines and shit, IEDs and shit, right? That's so awesome. I'm glad he's like, okay, I don't need it to look cool. You know what's cool? Killing Nazis. I don't care if it looks ugly. Do you know what's look ugly? Your dead ass. So there you go. This works. I like it just like, he's like a higher position and just tell them like, fucking follow me. Shut up.
Sail a fucking tank a mile through the ocean, build a road in front of us as we drive it up the beach, cut through barbed wire, and detonate mines. The only defensive structure left is the enormous concrete bunkers with Germans inside shooting machine guns and mortars. What are we going to do about them? Because normal tank guns aren't going to take those out effectively. Which is a pretty simple solution. If your gun isn't big enough, just get a bigger gun. Ladies and gentlemen, the petard. It is essentially a mortar that is the size of a propane tank, affectionately dubbed the flying dustbin.
You call that big?
Yeah, the thing's huge.
That explains a lot.
What is that supposed to mean?
You told me 8 inches.
And you told me you took installments.
I didn't know what that meant.
That's your problem. Interrupting my history time. And if the flying dustbin doesn't work, this one will. The most terrifying of all of the creations, the crocodile, aka the flamethrower tank, pulling a armored trailer with 500 gallons of jungle jelly, capable of shooting flames over 250
fire? What the
yards.
fuck?
So if everything goes according—
That's a long ass range, man. It's not flamethrower, it's flame spitter at that point.
aka the flamethrower tank, pulling a—
It spits out a long distance. Look at that. I guess it like spits out a fuel at a higher jet rate and just ignites it, right?
trailer with
Look at this.
500 gallons of jungle jelly, capable—
Ooh, look at this. Look at this. Oh, look at the distance.
Yards. So if everything goes according to plan so far, the
Distance is
enemy is either going to
insane.
be dead or retreating. Here's the problem. Once the enemy starts retreating, they're also going to start blowing up all the bridges behind them, making it very hard to maneuver vehicles, especially tanks, across ravines, rivers,
Scorched
ditches, and
type
so
of
on.
way.
So, what are we going to do once they blow up the bridges? Fuck it, I guess we'll just bring a bridge from home, right? No, I'm not messing with you. Ladies and gentlemen, bridge tank. Oh man,
I mean, look,
this
man.
is kind of silly, and there's no—
Look, British are the people when it comes to like making shit in a way, right? I don't know how else to say this, but yeah, things like this. Ingenious mechanical making shit type of way. Look at the bridges, like all the architectural bridges and things made by British, right? Things like this, it's like British are always great. They just went insane. Okay, what about bridge? We have bridge at home. Yeah, what about road? We have road at home. We'll just bring everything with us. This is insane.
no way that's gonna work, to oh my god, that's terrifying, to okay, now you guys are just showing off. And I know what you're thinking,
Seriously.
that's great, but what if it's just a little tiny anti-tank ditch or a ravine, not something that really necessitates an entire bridge? Well, that's easy, ladies and gentlemen, the fascine, aka a bundle of sticks.
Replace everything. Fuck it.
So that's it, the plan is set. Hobart has accounted for absolutely everything, and this plan is for sure gonna work. But here's the thing, you've probably seen a bunch of movies or played a bunch of video games that incorporate the landing at Normandy on D-Day, and you've never seen any of this stuff. So, why is that? That's because most movies and video games, like Saving Private Ryan, for example, take place on Omaha Beach, which was one of the American beaches, and the Americans didn't have access to all of Hobart's tanks. Why is that? Well, some people believe that the American leadership saw it and said that it was stupid, not gonna work, and they didn't want anything to do with them. However, that's a myth and it's completely untrue. Omar Bradley saw Hobart's inventions and requested all of them. Unfortunately, not enough could be made in time, and the only thing the American forces would be given for D-Day was the Sherman DD duplex drive amphibious tanks. And the reason that Hollywood focuses on Omaha Beach is because it's the most dramatic. It's the one beach of the 5 where absolutely everything went wrong. And believe it or not, one of the main things—
Yeah, I mean, obviously, right? It's like every shit. That's the one thing, even in the video games, right? Everybody getting just like, cut off by the fucking machine guns and everything. Is the one, like, there are two beaches, right, that went really wrong. That is one of that one. But there are beaches who just like completely went according how it should be, and they just like cleared the path. I'm guessing one of them must be this one. Hobart one. Yeah, and also like Americans thinking that is stupid. I don't see that. Like I said in the earlier video, Americans would have seen things that Hobart is doing. Even if they hate him, they would see the things that actually work, and they would be like, okay, let's just use this. One thing I would realize about America in general is like, doesn't matter how crazy shit is, if it works, they'll just take it. It should be effective. That's the only thing they care.
Things that went wrong was that the Sherman duplex drive tanks didn't make it. They got released too far off the beach, and the seas were too rough, and a lot of them ended up sinking. Luckily, only 5 tankers drowned. The rest were able to escape and get picked back up by the boats. But it was a huge issue not having tanks on Omaha Beach, and it is part of the reason that Omaha was the deadliest beach on D-Day. If you pay attention and you know what you're looking for, it's even referenced in the Saving Private Ryan movie.
No armor has made it ashore. We got no DD tanks on the beach. Dog 1 is not open.
So just so we're all on the same page, the reason most people have never seen or heard about the
Old Hollywood, I like that. I like old Hollywood and their need for realism and obviously chasing Oscar and shit. But sometimes you need to realize, like, I like realism, but in the end it's a fucking movie and people need to hear shit. I get in real battlefield, you won't hear shit anything, but that's the best thing about it. You're not on real battlefield, you're in a fucking theater. So half of that thing I had to like, wait, what is he saying? You need to put earphones on or something. Maybe in theater if it's like too loud, maybe you can hear it, but I don't know.
These things is because they weren't at Omaha Beach, and Hollywood focuses on Omaha Beach because it was the deadliest, most brutal battle. But the reason that it was the deadliest battle was quite literally in part due to the fact that Hobart's funnies weren't there to help the Allies fight. These tanks are quite literally a victim of their own success. To give you an example of how big of an impact they had on the other beaches, the next deadliest...
I mean, it's that thing, right? Like, if something works, you're not gonna know about it, right? Like, technology around you, engineering around you, if that works, you're not going to know about it. That's the whole point. If you know about it, it failed. So if something worked brilliantly, nobody's going to talk about it because it worked. They did the job. Your smartphone works so great, you're not even thinking about it. You just press, why is it slow? Why is it slow? The more better and better the phones get, I bet in a few years, people won't even know what is happening inside the phone. They won't even think about it, right? Apple is already doing this, like, Bionic A14, Bionic A5 without giving any much detail. Why do you need to know? Only Androids are doing that thing, right? Like it's a Snapdragon, this is a RAM, this and all this gigahertz and all that. Apple is not even doing it. Slowly everybody's going to do it. Just like, oh, this is this and that's it. It's an Apple phone. Inside who you care. Why do you care? If something becomes so good, people are not going to notice it.
Beach after Omaha is Juneau, and it had less than half the casualties. But Hobart and the 79th Armored Division's contributions aren't done on D-Day. At this point, Hobart decides rather than keeping all of his men together as one unit, like pretty much every other type of armored unit did, he decided that he was going to split them up and attach them and their specialty tanks to all the other units of the Allied forces, essentially turning his tank division into the special forces of tanks. You need to clear some mines? Here's the Crab. You need to scare some Germans? Here's the Crocodile.
That distance is
By the end of
crazy.
World War II, the Germans were so scared of the Crocodile flamethrower tank that they would start to surrender at the mere sight of it. The 79th Armored Division and Hobart's funnies fought
spits
all the
fire.
way through
Look at
the
that
European
shit.
theater, and when they finally came up to Germany, the first Allied forces to cross the Rhine into Germany did it in Hobart's duplex drive Sherman tanks. Because Hobart's funnies and the 79th Armored Regiment were spread out amongst all the other units in the European theater, every time a unit did something special, credit was given to that unit, and the contributions by Hobart's men, and the Hobart funnies would go unnoticed and unrecognized. So in conclusion, this was a story of Major General Percy Hobart, the man that pioneered modern tank warfare, the man that trained the men that beat Rommel in North Africa, the actual inventor of the Blitzkrieg tactic, and one of the most important...
Just saying tank is not a justice. Tank is literally the tool that modern warfare use as their main thing. So by saying that, basically saying that all the main shit that happened can be attributed to this man, because all the Blitzkrieg thing is because of tanks. All the strategies of the Germans and things is because of tanks and everything. Any battlefield or any attack happens through tank in World War II and past that. So all that because of this guy. All this nowadays a lot of tools are being made to clear this. This guy was already doing that in World War II in the basically Normandy. Like damn.
important architects of D-Day and the Allied advance through Europe. In the pages of history, he is a victim of his own success because everywhere he wasn't was such a catastrophic shit show that it monopolized the spotlight, and everywhere he was, things went so smooth that it wasn't worth reporting, so he went unnoticed. When people think of tank warfare in World War II, way too many people think of Erwin Rommel and Heinz Guderian, when in reality, they should be thinking of Percy Hobart, and I hope this video helps with that. Thanks for watching. Best way to support the channel is go buy some merch over thefatelectrician.com. Quack bang, out.
Nope. Okay. Seriously, man. This is so insane. Every time I see Federation video about something like this, like badass series, it changes the whole perspective of a larger scale thing. Like the whole 20th century, from between the World War I, World War II time to all the way to World War II, this one guy had this level of influence that literally no one talks about it. Every time I see Federation video like this, some badass guy, nobody talks about it. Right? This is insanity, man. His things and his like funnies, right? Hobart funnies was so insanely good. He was like literally the engineer of this time, right? Warfare engineer who just like basically pioneering this shit. Oh. But you know, Federation point is really good. When you do something good or right, you go unnoticed, which is the case with Percy, I guess, right? And I think about that a lot when I see things around me all the time, right? I mean, Faraday and everybody just like, okay, there are like really famous people like the, you know, those just, you know, I guess it just go like unnoticed, even though that without them basically 99% of things won't happen, right? A lot of engineers, you look left and right, you just hear about certain thing happening in the news. Oh, this Marvel happened, that's it, right? Certain thing works. How does that work? Oh, it just works. What is that like in Las Vegas, that eye, right? They made this LED screen whole arena, right? Is just going to work. People are going to think that it's like an iPhone. Oh, it's just a thing we do now, rather than appreciating how hard it would have been and how hard people are constantly working every day to maintain it, right? Only way people would know about it more if it fails. Like, why did it fail, this and that? But if it works, nobody's going to talk about it. It's just working. Like, oh, isn't that a spectacle, like watching fireworks? But no, it's like an insane technology being worked. So whenever something works, nobody talks about it. That's engineering around it. People take it for granted all the time, right? Yeah. Well, that was the real tank genius of World War II, Percy Hobo Hobart. If you like my reaction, don't forget to subscribe, and yeah, I'll see you next time.